So welcome everybody. We're having the Governance Subcommittee of the Harbor Subcommittee. Today's date is 6/15/2022. The agenda is one single item this evening, which is to further review the proposal of the shellfish regulations and the aquaculture regulations. Josh, thank you. I think everybody knows each other. Josh, thank you for putting many hours into this and additional hours since we last met to kind of consolidate the document. I think I'd just open it up by asking if, oh, Jack's with us. Great. Hi, Jack.
Hi, sorry, I was on the select board agenda. I cut that short and then I couldn't find this, but I am here joining all the truly important people in Cohasset.
Just for the record, I'm just going to go through the roll. Tim Davis is a member of the Harbor Committee. Barbara Canny is a member of the Governance Subcommittee. David Farag is a member of the Governance Subcommittee. Oh, and Barbara C is also a member of the Harbor Committee. Susan Bryant is a member of the Harbor Committee. Jack Creighton is a selectman and I believe the liaison to the Harbor Committee.
And the chair.
And the chair. And Josh Kimball is, Josh, you have many hats. You, I believe, are the Shellfish Constable. Is that the title, Josh?
Natural Resource Officer.
Okay, Natural Resource Officer.
Also the Shellfish Constable, though.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Those are two of the many hats he wears.
Sure. Going forward, I know I've already reached out to Tracy. I'm sorry. In addition to that, I believe we have the Harbor Master, Lori Gibbons, on the phone. So welcome everybody and thank you for coming. Concerning the Shellfish Constable and Natural Resource Officer, I did reach out to the Selectman's office just to see if we had a definition or a job posting on that or a job description, Josh. So if you have that, that'd be great to send along for future reference for us when we're looking at these issues and see how things, under the governance umbrella fit together with some other stakeholders in the harbor.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be helpful. Thank you. Josh, do you want to talk about any changes that you made to the document since the last time we met?
Sure. So I'm working off my phone here, so let me just try to pull it up. There were a couple of questions, pretty much everything was good to go in regards to the language that I have inside of the two documents, which were shellfish regulations for both recreational and commercial shell fishing. And then there were also separate regulations that I had come up with for private aquaculture and shellfish grants. At the last meeting, it was asked of me to consolidate the two into one document, which has been done. There was also some grammatical errors that I had made since I typed probably 200 words a minute. And I just didn't catch them beforehand, which was very, very helpful. All the sets of eyes that we had on this to go through that, it was absolutely tremendous, and I thank everyone for their input for that. So now I've made those editorial comments. There were also some side questions from various members of the board that had asked me in relation to some of the excerpts that are in there. An explanation was given to them. One example of one would be in the shellfish regulations. There was questioning of what's called a recreational management area and some of the verbiage that was in that stating that it was closed to commercial shell fishing. And that has been resolved with the committee member that had asked me that question. And I think it was just, familiarity with the terms and the language that's used in shellfish bylaws and shellfishing in general that triggered that concern. So I pretty much get everything all final drafted here. What I've sent to the committee yesterday afternoon, I believe it was, and trying to keep track of time here, is the final draft with all edits made.
I appreciate that, Josh. I know this is, this is all new to us, so I'd like to ask the governance subcommittee members if they have any additional questions, and then I have just a couple of comments. Barb, do you have any additional questions? You're on mute, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things that, and I don't know what this follows, my husband was trying to explain this to me and stuff, but the amount of the surety bond and the insurance he was concerned about are liabilities.
Yeah.
And I had sent Marion's bylaws to Lisa, but I didn't send it because I was confused. I thought I wasn't allowed to share stuff online all of a sudden.
Well, under the open meeting law, we're not supposed to deliberate by email.
Okay.
So I think that's a legitimate question. I think, I don't know if anybody else noticed that it seems like the liability insurance, I just picked it up myself today, is only 12,500.
that's-
I'm wondering if that's a typo?
No, that's the bond, I believe, is
That's the bond.
12,500.
Okay, so I'm sorry, what are the piece that you're referring to, Bob? What section?
Oh, so no, that was the same section, but it's insurance. So so the insurance for the town to cover anything that's going, if anything should happen with the equipment or anything, where do we become covered? Where do we become liable, and where does the farmer not become liable? And are we being realistic about the amount that it's going to cost us to get machinery in there to do any fixing or anything? Who sets the rates? Do we?
Josh, do you want to speak to that about what, why you chose what you did?
Yeah, so this is on the amount of the liability section is on par with various communities in what they charge in regards to labor rates for the harbor master or the shellfish constable to go out and remove any equipment that's derelict. We very, very, very rarely see it as oysters are a luxury item now, where farmers are getting upwards of $1 more per piece. That's market size. So if they have a cage that goes floating and is washed up shore, they are going to want to recover that themselves because that's money that's essentially in their piggy bank.
They're also going to find an empty cage when they come and get it too.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So, they're going to, kind of police their own, just like the commercial lobstermen do in regards to gear. They all help out one another. And we see that as a common trait within fishing and shellfishing commercial industries, where farmers will help out one another and fishermen will help out one another. So we don't expect that it will rise to that level where there's going to be, floating cages all throughout the harbor. And we would need to charge someone, but I had added that all in there just in case. In regards to liability insurance and all that, the performance bond there of 12,500 is on par with what other towns that have more vibrant aquaculture in their municipalities, and that's what they are charging. Oh, well, that's what they require. I'm sorry. And they are required to maintain that business liability insurance for the time that they have their shellfish grant with us.
Laurie, would you like to comment on any of this where it's, there seemed to be dual responsibility here? It says resource officer or harbor master.
Yeah. Now you say that the insurance bond 12.5 is what other towns charge. I thought, or require, I should say. I thought Situate was $1 million.
Yeah, I'm not sure what Situate's looking at.
I think there's two things. The bond A performance bond or whatever, what they're doing would be different than the general liability insurance. General liability insurance, yeah, you're going to be looking at $1 million, or like what they call a 1-2 policy. $1 million per each occurrence, 2 million total. That's generally cheap to get. But a performance bond, you generally have to put a dollar for dollar for that bond. So when you see a $12,500 bond, they're putting up $12,500 usually. Performance bonds are pretty expensive. I know from, when they do them through the planning board. So general liability policy, that $1 million you can get is cheap money. But
Yeah.
the performance bond is something different. So
So, you're saying in your section 6 liability, number 1, you're talking about 2 different bonds, correct? One a liability insurance and the other a performance bond? I mean, the liability insurance should be one amount and a performance bond the other.
Yeah, so the liability insurance, I did not put in an amount there because I don't believe that me as the shellfish constable, has that authority to overstep the select board and demand someone or mandate someone to have a certain amount of liability insurance. I'd leave that up to the select board and the town council to determine how much money or what the amount for the liability insurance would be. And that's why I went with the $12,500 surety bond, performance bond, as that's on par with other communities that they would require in the event of gear removal or removal of anything else that's out on the grant.
So Joshua, are you saying that when they go in for their license, it's at that time that the selectmen will decide how much liability insurance they have to have? I guess what I'm saying is it's just going to be random.
That would have to be a policy that would be set by the select board. I wouldn't be able to, based on my position,
Yeah.
or even the town manager, comment and mandate what the town would require for liability insurance for that.
And to that point, Josh, I did have a conversation with Jack Creighton during the past couple of days concerning, which direction we were going in on this. And I think, we are going to have this whole thing reviewed by town council, obviously before it moves.
Yeah, I had spoken with Chris Senior as well, and had told him that we would absolutely have it vetted through town council, as they've got someone who's pretty sufficient in aquaculture and shellfish bylaws that's on that team.
Yep.
Yeah.
We've met several times with Amy on other governance issues for the Harbor Committee, and they represent many coastal communities, so they're aware of these issues. But just so people understand that is going to be, a stop on the road of this process. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I just wanted to,
Go ahead, Jack.
yeah, Josh, could you send the request for the liability guidance to Chris Senior? Because
Yeah.
I do,
Absolutely.
yeah, my personal opinion, and I haven't really given a lot of thought, is that anybody doing that kind of stuff in our waters, if they do something that creates a liability, we would want to make sure that they're properly insured. But send it to Chris, put it on his radar screen. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Definitely.
Let's see. David, did you have any questions?
the only question I had was in reviewing it was, while Josh has everybody here, if he could just explain, especially on the commercial one, not the residential one, but on the commercial one, the permitting process as somebody would go through it if they're going to do commercial shell fishing, because and then I just had a comment after it. Yeah.
Yeah. So initially, what we would do is I would consult the select board is going to be the overall majority who has control over all shellfish resources in the town. So I would consult with them as well as the harbor committee to see if we would want to open or if we could even sustain commercial shellfishing in our town. Commercial shellfishing is separate from aquaculture. Aquaculture is where we are going to lease out a portion of our waters to an individual or an organization for the purpose of growing shellfish to eventually sell to market. Whereas commercial shellfishing is where someone would, let's say, for example, go out into Little Harbor at low tide, harvest a peck of soft shell clams, and then sell them to a fish market. So that is entirely separate from the two. I know there was some questioning in regards to that, and it does get a little mixed up from time to time. So we would have to first step determine what our indigenous shellfish population is. And then I would have to consult with the select board and the harbor committee to determine if that indigenous shellfish population would be sufficient enough to support commercial shellfishing, especially after, we get a certain amount of fishermen that are out there, see how long it would take to replenish the stock. So the town may not even be able to support commercial shellfishing because we're not getting that reproduction rate from the various species that we have out there. So, but if it were to open, again, we'd go out, we'd do the survey, and then the commercial shellfishing person would have to have a state seller's license through the Division of Marine Fisheries. They would also they need to do some permitting through DMF additionally in regards to that seller's license. But then they would bring their state seller's license to me. I would be the one that would be issuing the commercial shellfish permits. There would be those, I listed the types there on there. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Sorry. So there's different types of commercial permits. There's a quahog only permit. There's a soft shell clam only permit. There's a scallop only permit. There's an eel permit. And then there's what's called a master permit. And the master permit allows all species to be harvested under one permit. So they wouldn't have to purchase separate ones for each species that they would want to harvest. So once they essentially have that commercial permit from me, they would go out into designated areas where the town and the select board and the harbor committee would input onto where commercial harvesting would be allowed. They would go out, they'd harvest. If they bump into me on an inspection, I inspect them. And then they would then bring that catch with their state seller's card, a tag that states where it was harvested from and the management area where it was harvested from. And then they would be able to sell their catch.
If I could just bring a little background on this. Right now, the Cohasset waters are closed to shellfishing. And there are two reasons why Cohasset waters are closed to shellfishing. Number one, we did not have an active shellfish constable, which we now have in probably the most educated and experienced shellfish constable in the state of Massachusetts, Josh Kimball. And secondly, we did not have a bylaw. So once we pass a bylaw, then we can start to open Cohasset waters to both recreational and commercial shellfishing. In my opinion, there is no place in Cohasset on shore or near shore where we can have commercial aquaculture. What commercial aquaculture probably will mean in the future, and this is what the Harbor Committee looked at in part of the harbor plan, and what we're doing with Government Island is preparing for the future if the lobsters decide they're going to move further north, is create an opportunity for commercial fishermen to have offshore aquaculture, which could be anything from oysters to clams to quahogs to mussels to various types of kelp and other grasses. So that's in the future. But we needed to get these two things in place before we even start looking at both recreational and commercial shellfishing.
Tim, thank you. I know we're on limited time, so I want to get to some more questions.
I just had
I know-
one quick
I know-
thing. Go Go
So,
ahead. Let Susan go. Yeah.
So first of all, this is ostensibly of concern to commercial fishermen. Are there commercial fishermen represented on the committee?
This, Susan, this is the governance subcommittee, and this was the first step along the line of this process.
Right, but you guys haven't even consulted me, and I have done a shellfish survey here. You didn't come to the State of the Harbor where we present this kind of stuff.
Susan,
I'm sort of in the dark as to why I just been told about this today. That there's even
as I
that
said,
there's bylaws being written, and I have a lot of information on what is and isn't out there. Mussels, not looking good.
Susan, I've known you for a long time.
This kind of stuff, you guys, is really appalling to me that you wouldn't think to come into Cohasset Center for Student Coastal Research and let us know what's going on.
Susan,
We
can
have
I finish?
Ben Collins out there every day doing oceanography studies of salinity in the harbor. You can't make policy about ecology without ecologists involved in it.
May make a statement, Susan. Susan, as you know, I'm very familiar with CSCR. My husband was a founding member of it. I can look out my window and see CSCR. I served on one point on the board. We are very
And
respectful.
you guys, I have asked you before to let us know what is going on in the harbor, and Tim, you agreed to do that at the meetings. Last time I've missed a few early parts of the meeting, and I tried to catch up online and they hadn't been recorded, so I couldn't actually do the homework to catch up. So I'm just discouraged about promises to keep us all in the loop, and I get tons of questions from lots of people who ask me what's going on in the harbor, and I can't answer them because I'm on the harbor committee, but I can get informed.
So let me just tell you the process, okay? We undertook to look at this proposal. This is a proposal. This proposal is before us. It is not going to be rushed through by any stretch of the imagination. Our committee, the governance subcommittee, which is the subcommittee of the harbor committee, have seen this document. I had it in my possession, but the harbor committee, governance subcommittee was not appointed. We then got the people appointed, these good folks like David and Susan, I'm sorry, Debbie Shad and Barbara's on the harbor committee. We are looking at it, the second glance, nothing has been finished. Nothing has been, it's not like tonight we're rubber stamping this thing and away you go. My understanding, and I've consulted with the chair of the selectmen, who was here with us, is that it's going to be reviewed by the town council, and it will undoubtedly have to be part of a hearing process of something that is of this import. So I think you may misunderstand where we are. The governance subcommittee is just looking at the structure of any sort of bylaw. And it was going to be my recommendation that, we support it in principle, but that it has to be looked at by other learned, knowledgeable people, which would include CSER, which would include the town council. So I think you're misunderstanding who we are.
Ecologists and fishermen.
Absolutely.
Ecologists and fishermen. And if you don't understand the economics of fishing, we're going to get it wrong. I can't represent the fishermen. I would get it wrong. We have to include them so that the economic aspects will work for them, and the sensible logistical aspects will work for them, and the ecological aspects of what is harvestable works for natural resources.
I don't think there's any question that those people would be valuable. And I hope that we either, and I don't know what the selectmen's decision will be. They may send this to planning. They may send this to, Concon. They may send this to a bunch of different places. We're an advisory committee. We're not an adjudicatory committee. And this group is a subcommittee. So I think it's a process.
I would say just put it on the right foot going at the beginning, like put it on the right foot. If you start with legislation, it's going to be, it's not going to be as informed as it should be, and it might not do what you want it to do.
Well, I'm just going to make one more comment on the process, and is that I found in my, God help me, almost 40 years of regulation writing and legislative background, it is helpful to work with the draft, so then you can kind of have a construct. It doesn't mean it's a final document. We're just trying to begin a process. Fran?
Yeah, I don't see any clam diggers here tonight. I happen to be a clam digger and have dug clams here for the last 67, 70 years, I guess. And we used to have a pretty active clam fishery here, with out to Whale Meadow, which we call Longs, and out on the Bassett Beach area, which all of a sudden we had to have Situate license for, and Little Harbor.
And now, since all the development around town, we've had lots of pollution. So all of the flats have been closed, and for good reason. I remember as a little kid, we dug a bunch of clams up with a Veterans Park. Yes, now that was the fire station, and we had our pockets all full of clams. And the fireman said, "What are you going to do with those clams?" "We're going to take them out." They said, "They're polluted." I said, "Well, what does that mean?" But anyway, so we had a pretty active clamming society here in town. We had almost no commercial clamming. We did have regulations. We had regulations. They were written regulations. So I suggest that you go back and look in some of the town records and find out what the regulations were. They were pretty simple. They were pretty straightforward. And when we wanted to get a clam license, which you got every year, you went to the town clerk and you got a clam license. And I don't think there was a charge for it. If it was 50 cents. It wasn't much. But that's how things were done. So we're trying to reinvent the wheel here. And again, maybe that's the whole thing about trying to find a problem for a solution.
I disagree. I disagree that we're trying to reinvent the wheel, because there aren't the proper regulations on, and we didn't have a proper shellfish constable for many years, and now we do. So this is to address that situation so it can be put to bed, so it can be properly done. And the subcommittee was created to basically sort of wordsmith it. And then this would be the first part to then go to the Harbor Committee, and then to go around to everybody else who needs to see a piece of it and go there. So it's really about structure more than it is everything else.
Well, David, I'm telling you, go back and look at the regulations that we had before we start coming up with a whole bunch of new ones, because
Brandon, it makes a lot of sense. If we can find them, we obviously will be part of the discussion.
Mhm.
And I don't want, Lisa Hewitt is not rushing through anything. We have this regulation. It's important that we get it sooner than later, just for the protection of the town. But it is going to have the right process. We are going to have the right process if I'm involved with it, and then if Tim is involved with it, we're going to make this appropriate. This was just step one. Susan, I don't want you to think that in any way that this is a fait accompli. We've only been looking at this document for a very small time. I know the harbor master, I kind of cut her off earlier. So Laurie, did you want to ask some additional questions?
Well, we're almost out of time, so I'll just forward my questions on to the next step in the process.
That's great. Thanks.
I just had a quick one. It wasn't a question, but it was on when you're talking about commercial aquaculture, because I think in the permitting process, while the selectmen are going to be the final judgment on it, that definitely the Harbor Committee the Harbor Committee needs to be at least given advisory opinion on it, so that when it gets the selectmen, it's ready for prime time, and they're not just stuck with, okay, now they've got to figure everything out, because on the Harbor Committee, you do have the harbor master, you do have all the other players that are in the harbor that would have questions, that would have issues, and that can be all worked out, or mostly worked out. And if there's a major question or major problem, then it can be brought at that point. But I think the selectmen, as a board, beyond the typical things that they do budget-wise or whatever, they do have other licensing authorities, such as you have your Vittler's licenses, you have your beer and wine licenses, you have your one-day licenses. They have to wear a lot of hats. And so, but when they do get it, those things are ready to go for them to talk about, have questions, and make a decision on, and they're not just stuck from square one to say, okay, what are we doing here? So I think that portion in the aquaculture permit, when we're doing the commercial, when we're doing the commercial portion of it, that should definitely get an advisory look from the Harbor Committee.
Well, I think the next step was going to be just send it to the Harbor Committee.
No, I meant when you have the regulations,
Sure.
in other words, the
Sure.
process, that
Tell
those
them.
things be hammered out, because you've got the sailing club, you've got the yacht club, you've got the harbor master, you've got the natural resource officer. And if there's any warts, that's the time to take care of them before the full application gets to. And if there's any conditions that any of those groups would want in there, those can be presented in the final application that goes to the selectmen. So again, they're not stuck with having to have everything to work out at once and then having it go from hearing to hearing to hearing to hearing.
Right.
I think it's a more polished application coming to them, and it
Yeah.
doesn't waste their time. I think
And I
that
al-
that's what I was trying to say.
I would also add to that, that CSCR and CMI both have positions on the Harbor Committee. They will be represented, as Susan is the representative of the Harbor Committee. So that there will be a place and input from all those organizations. And having been the proud mother of that initiative petition and ran around for the signatures, I think that now it shows that how important it is going to come to be. Jack?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what David said. It's very important for the select board to have the committees do the basic work. And I believe that we believe at the select board level to empower your committees. You need to do the legwork. You need to ask those questions. You need to bring like coastal research into the process. So when it comes to us, we know that all the various opinions in town have been vetted and listened and incorporated into that. And yes, we have the right to make changes, but we would really prefer not to have to. We'd really prefer to say, boy, you guys did a great job. Thank you very much. All in favor, say aye. But it's important. The work that you guys are doing is so important. So thank you for the work you're doing.
So we're kind of at a place now that we have to decide what our steps are going to be now. What the governance subcommittee members would like to do going forward. Do we want to hold on to this prior to sending it on to the Harbor Committee? Do we want to send it on to the Harbor Committee adoption in principle and recommend that they hold hearings? Do we want to hold hearings? I just need to have an idea of David and Barbara and how would you like to go forward?
Lisa, could I just add one thing?
Sure.
So to piggyback onto what Jack and David's concern were with aquaculture, in section 2 of the eligibility requirements, I did put in there that any interested party who wants to become an aquaculturist in our town has to consult with me. Once I'm notified of that, I'm to notify the harbor master and the harbor committee. After that, the harbor committee can interview the applicant. Based on the majority vote of the harbor committee, then they would make that recommendation to the select board. So I just wanted to point that out, that regulation is in there already, just as that extra layer.
Yeah, Josh, that'd be something that I think we'd have to talk about under the umbrella of governance, because right now the Harbor Committee is an advisory committee. It's not an adjudicatory committee. We don't make decisions. So that would be something that, maybe it's a great idea, maybe it's not a great idea. We just have to, I think that's something that we would have to think through.
Yeah, I put it all there as a boilerplate to kind of get the gears moving and the gear oil and all that.
I know we're running over, and if Fran's got a comment or a question, but with that, the way I'm thinking about it is, and the way it was put in there in the document, is the same thing when we have planning and zoning. Sometimes when the planning board gets things, they get the opinion from the zoning board that yes, it complies with Cohasset zoning. So they're not making an adjudicatory decision on it, but they're just advising, okay, the plan complies with zoning. Here you go. Now you can look at it. And the same thing with this is that while the Harbor Committee is not an adjudicatory board, it can certainly be an advisory capacity and give whatever advisory conditions it would need or whatever. And then when it goes to the actual permitting board, which is the selectmen, again, it would be a more polished package of what's going to be needed to be done, as opposed to them having to figure everything out and having, 15 people with 15 different questions. It can all be worked out on those other ends. That's all.
Sure.
And I know
Can you move this forward, please?
Just one quick comment. Let's not confuse aquaculture with shellfishing. We got to make sure that they're two separate and independent issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Fran. I know, Tim, one moment, please. I know, Tim, we have to go to our next meeting of the full Harbor Committee. I do need to know what David and Barbara think our next step should be. Should we have another meeting of this committee? Should we, as I said before, should we vote in principle? That would be to recommend this to the Harbor Committee, and with the recommendation that we wait for input from town council and to hold some sort of public meetings where we could get some input from all the stakeholders.
I think it should be moved personally, and I know everybody can speak for themselves, that at least from the subcommittee, it should be moved up to the Harbor Committee. And and move forward from there. We saw the draft, we went over the draft, everybody made their changes to the draft. It certainly is a work in progress. It's not going to be the final thing, as we all know, with a couple different things, but it should be moved to the next level. And then the Harbor Committee, if they want to have a meeting on it and have, public, I dare use the word public hearings on, in the sense that I don't think the capacity of the Harbor Committee, way it's structured, allows for that. I think just, your general meetings with that on it would be good enough. But I think we should vote on it and move it on to the Harbor Committee, because
Okay,
at
Barbara?
least from my perspective.
Barbara,
Yeah, I agree with David. I think that's what we should be doing.
okay, can I have a motion? Then the three of us could at least vote on
Oh,
it. And Lori too. Lori, I'm sorry. Lori is a member of the governance subcommittee. Lori?
so,
I think she's a non-voting member, Lisa.
Okay, but I'd like to hear her opinion.
Here. I'm here.
Okay, Lori, do you think that we should at least vote on this in principle and move it on to the bigger committee so that we can have a bigger platform to discuss all the issues?
Well, I think there are still a number of issues that haven't been answered. But maybe the bigger platform can take care of it. I don't know.
yeah, I motion that we move it up.
Okay, so may I, can I amend your motion to just adopt the proposal in principle and contingent on input from town council? Because I'm a little anxious about not knowing.
Yeah,
what
I'll
we
say
don't know.
town council and the Harbor Committee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. David Farag.
I vote yes.
Barbara.
I vote yes.
Okay, and Lisa Hewitt, I vote yes. And I think Tim's right that Lori is a non-voting member of the governance subcommittee. So, okay, well, thank you, everybody. I know we have to jump on to the full Harbor Committee meeting now. And my recommendation to that, and I can speak to it in a couple of minutes, is to, set a time soon that the Harbor Committee can discuss this, because they're obviously not going to be prepared tonight.
But we are going to discuss it at the Harbor Committee, but we'll just carry on from this. Okay, thank you. Cassandra, are we all set to go to the Harbor Committee?
Yes, Lisa just needs to officially adjourn.
Okay, I move to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Yeah.
Okay.
Adjourn.
And yes,
Well-
everybody
Do we
switch
have
over.
to, Cassandra, do we have to go out and end it again?
Yes, because it's a different link.
Okay. Thank you all.
See you all there.
Thank you.
Thank you.